Okay, hey there, everyone. Welcome to emelletv. I'm Gabriel, also known as Fake Nichols on social media. I'm a script teacher. I also I'm a co-founder of a startup called Vana.app, which is trying to bring better payments for the digital economy here in Brazil. I also do some blockchain experimentation in the free time, and that's me. So there goes Dave.
Cool. Yeah, I'm David. I'm from Barcelona. I work remotely for Ahrefs. It's a SEO company where we have like all the backend. We are a common shop, and the front end is in Reason actually. So, yeah. Aside from that, I maintain Hostile PPX, which is a somewhat famous PPX that um, tries to bring type-safe CSS into your components. And aside from that, yeah, just a regular guy who does sports and goes running. So we try to bring people who are interesting for us and interesting for the community. We try to bring the gap between risk, crypto, camel, and reason, and try to like ask them silly questions, ask the future about ML languages. And we are here today with Oscar. So I think it's time to introduce Oscar.
Okay, so let's add him to the show. Let me
Hey,
just
hey,
change the.
Hey, Oscar, how are you?
I'm great. How's everybody doing?
Pretty good, pretty
Yeah,
good.
very good.
So, yeah, Oscar, do a little bit of intro about yourself. And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my name is Oscar Spencer. I'm one of the co-creators of the Grain programming language. I've been working on this project for about 4 years now. It's funny how time really flies. Outside of that, I work on other WebAssembly stuff. I work at a startup called Suborbital Software Systems. We're doing WebAssembly functions as a service. It's completely awesome. Definitely check that out. And beyond that, my background is being a JavaScript developer. So it's a big surprise that I'm where I am today for sure.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Like, I think we might all share the same background, but yeah. So, are you happy that you move away from JavaScript and you started doing a WebAssembly?
Yeah,
Or
yeah, it's super interesting because the cool thing about WebAssembly is it's so cutting edge. And like the technologist in me is like, oh yeah, it's awesome to be working on all this bleeding edge stuff. It's super duper exciting. I mean, I still get to write some JavaScript now and then, and I'm still in some JavaScript communities like the Vue community and whatnot. Um, but overall, I have to say I love having my full-time job working on WebAssembly because sort of before this, I could only work on WebAssembly or grain stuff sort of nights and weekends, right? And so like now I get to live and breathe WebAssembly. I get to see all the new proposals coming out, track everything all day long. Like it's awesome.
that's cool.
I wouldn't change it for the world.
That's cool. So, where are you from?
Yeah, I'm originally from South Florida, so no Florida man hate, please. But these days I'm living in Boston, Massachusetts, in the States. Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. So yeah, we want to know like how was your transition? Like when when WebAssembly came, like you were scrolling Reddit and then you saw that everybody like was like I don't know insulting JavaScript, and then you said, "Oh, they are right." So yeah, just explain us the path.
Yeah. So pretty much what happened was back in 2017, WebAssembly had just gotten turned on by default in all the major browsers. And so like of course there was like all this hype around it. It's like, oh hey, you got a new assembly language, right? Like no longer are we writing JavaScript and back in that time
Right.
CoffeeScript and like these other languages like in the browser, right? We could write real languages. And so that was exciting. And for me, I had always been interested in programming languages. And so I was like, oh, there's a unique opportunity right now and only right now to create a
Yeah.
brand new language for WebAssembly. And so if we could, get something together, try and make it interesting, people could be interested and this is a real chance to make something awesome. So I was still an undergrad at the time. I was a senior in undergrad and me and my friend Philip, we were taking a grad levels compiler course. And for the final project in the class, they said, "Oh, just implement any interesting feature
Right.
in the language." And so a lot of people were like adding strings or stuff like that. But I was like, "Yo, like, can we do WebAssembly?" We went to our professor. We were like, "Can we like target WebAssembly like for our project?" And our professor was like, "All right." And so yeah, we did it. I remember we were sitting in an apartment. We were sitting in Philip's apartment, and I remember when we got a grain lambda to bind to a DOM event for the first time. Like we attached a grain lambda to a button, and I remember we clicked on the button, we saw like the event fire, and we lost our minds. We were like, "Yo, we just made a WebAssembly language," and so like that was incredible.
Wow.
And yeah, that was possible because the original WebAssembly spec was written in OCaml. And our language, our compiler was written in OCaml. So for us to compile to OCaml, so swap from x86, we just targeted the WASM spec. We just added the WASM spec as a dependency, and then just made all instructions hit WASM, and that was it. And so that was incredible. So yeah, for those of you who are wondering what grade we got on the initial version of Grain, I think we got like a B+ on Grain.
Okay.
Our professor's complaint being that it would have been far cooler if we could target both x86 and WebAssembly. But even back then, I knew the future was WebAssembly. Like that's all we needed.
Right. So do you now have like that professor that said, this language is not going to work, or like any sort of comments that later on they saw the unicorn going up, or you don't have that?
I haven't talked to him in a while, to be honest. We ran into him a couple years ago because he actually lived in the same neighborhood as me and Philip at the time. And we were just grabbing dinner at a restaurant. We saw him there, and so we went over to say hi. And he was like, "Oh, how's that like project you were working on going?" And we were like, "Yeah, we have like 1,000 stars on GitHub." And he was like, a huge shock that, we actually made it anywhere at all. But yeah, I haven't heard from him. I should check in on him. I've been learning if you're
go
watching.
back and say, can we revisit that B+? Like,
yeah, can we revisit that?
yeah,
that's stuck in history forever.
Yeah, that's a good one. So let's ask the question, like, what's WebAssembly? Like, from the history, from the web, without getting too deep, like, why do we need it? How does like the overview works? Just in case from the people on the back that never heard of it.
Yeah, for sure. So the whole idea behind WebAssembly is, up until now in the browser, the only language that you can write is JavaScript. And that means even for other languages like TypeScript, CoffeeScript, even Reason, Rescript, these languages, they all compile to JavaScript. They don't compile to any sort of special bytecode or any sort of special assembly language. It's all JavaScript. And so this is not the sustainable way to build a future of like a high performing web, right? The way that we do that is by having a proper assembly language on the web that we can use for languages. So we're actually going to see a huge explosion of languages beyond the languages we have today. So right now, folks are seeing a lot of C code, REST code, Grain code, assembly script right now as people using for WebAssembly. But you're going to start seeing, Python in your browser. You're going to start seeing Ruby. You're going to start seeing all these sorts of languages. So that's the whole idea behind WebAssembly. But the folks working on WebAssembly decided to be really smart about it. They said, hey, let's not just toss any sort of assembly language on the web. Let's actually have it properly sandboxed. Let's have it secure. Let's make sure that we can have certain capabilities and have them only work if you say that they're okay. And these were some really interesting properties that they decided to go with, where now, and if you had told me this 3 years ago, I wouldn't have believed you, that nowadays we're actually seeing far more use of WebAssembly outside of the browser. So not just in the browser, we're seeing server-side WebAssembly here and there. You're definitely starting to see blockchains running WebAssembly because it's a fantastic execution language because it's sandboxed and secure, right? So that's like the general idea of WebAssembly. We can get super deep on how some people want WebAssembly to replace Kubernetes, replace containers.
So yeah, let me go back to a second because before CoffeeScript, I would say that Microsoft was, and now I'm gonna get the hat of Bill Gates probably. But the idea is that you would have like C#, and you could have like this sort of like front and back end all together. You would have no separation over those that now felt familiar, but back in the days, that was like, that's one thing. The web is one. And those frameworks, they used to happen before. What would you say that then later like split it in front end and back end very separately, and we start doing some JavaScript and then any other language? Do you see that in WebAssembly stuff is gonna merge again? Like there's not gonna be much difference between front end and back end? What are the performance benefits? Like why should we care basically?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two different ways to look at that. So the first answer is yes, we're definitely going to start seeing stuff merge again, where yeah, you can write your backends in C if you want, and then you can write your front ends in C as well. Which, granted, I don't know about you all. I personally don't want to write a web app in C,
Right.
but it's certainly possible. But yeah, if for people who really want to experience the universal web, you'll be able to write, your front ends and back ends in the same language if you'd like to. But the huge benefit of WebAssembly is that it's going to be completely modular. We're going to be able to write all sorts of different kinds of components for all aspects of the web in whatever language we want. And I think this is one of the places where I think WebAssembly is really going to succeed if we do it right as a community, as the WebAssembly community. There's a bunch of proposals right now for interface types, which is defining exactly how WebAssembly modules will be able to talk to each other.
Right.
But as long as we get this right, you'll be able to say, hey, actually, yeah, I need to write this cryptography library. What's a solid language for me to write that in? And you can say, you know what, I'm gonna pick Rust. Because Rust is a nice, safe language that I can do all the low-level stuff that I need to do in, right? And then you can also say, yeah, well, for other stuff like maybe I want to write this script, I want to write this like app or something where I don't need to have this mission critical like language for everything. I can choose a language like Grain. I can choose a language that's really high level and write these things. And it's not going to matter what all these different modules, what language they're written in at all. They'll all just be able to talk to each other.
Right. And how are they gonna, like, I imagine there's like some sort of like API. I heard that like the thing WASI, because it's an interface between this model. Is that gonna how a Rust cryptography model will talk to your main application?
Yeah, so WASI is more about the systems interface. So WASI is the WebAssembly systems interface, and the idea behind that is just sort of providing system calls for your language or whatever.
Right.
So access to files and stuff like that. So for interface types, there's the module linking proposal, which will be able to do runtime module linking. So you'll be able to pull all these modules from wherever they live. If you have some living on a CDN somewhere or somewhere else, you'll just be able to pull them together and they'll be able to link at runtime. There's also some folks working on ways to do static linking of all these modules, and people working on registries and whatnot to get ahead of some of this stuff. But it's largely going to be pretty automatic. Right now, it's still fairly manual. We have a couple tools to say, hey, generate this file that produces the right interface for other modules to interact with this and whatnot. But in the future, we're actually going to see a lot more automated, just at runtime or just static build tools.
Right. That's perfect. So what about what are the downsides? Like people from the front end has been always like over obsessed about performance, over obsessed about accessibility, like animations, the 60 fps, like all these things are like more or less in the mind of a regular front end developer. How would you do all of this in WebAssembly?
Yeah, so overall, one of the goals of WebAssembly was to be fast, right? Like we want to have a fast web. We want binaries that are small. We want to execute them at near native speed. And that's one of the really cool things about WebAssembly is the fact that you can like run Doom in your browser, right? And it runs at near native speed. And that's, incredibly impressive. But I think, yeah, a lot of folks are thinking probably too much about performance right now. I see a lot of folks saying, my app's not performant enough. How do I grab WebAssembly to do this thing? When in fact, we've had JavaScript for a long time. JavaScript engines are scary fast. And like the just-in-time compiling that these compilers do, your JavaScript code runs really fast. And a lot of the time, you're not going to see like a huge speed up, from just swapping over to WebAssembly. And so right now, at least, I think, I would definitely caution people, before jumping ship just to get to WebAssembly. like for speed's sake. But in the future, yeah, we're going to see super duper high performance WebAssembly happening. And I think that's when people can start thinking about those things. Of course, right now, basically, it's like, yeah, if there's mission critical paths in your application where it's like, oh, I need to do this one thing super duper fast. And that makes sense. Like we're starting to see some people have like video codecs and stuff written in WebAssembly, which, you know, makes a lot of sense. And so we're going to start seeing some of that. And then as the future moves on, we'll actually start to see, you know, people like starting to transition to do like their entire apps or whatnot.
Right.
In fact,
yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, as far as I know, there isn't really any like spectacular, you know, Java like sort of DOM library for WebAssembly yet.
Right.
And that's largely because we're still waiting on some WebAssembly proposals to come through to allow us to do a lot of these things.
Right.
But like as soon as that happens, it's going to be really interesting to see what sort of libraries we can be putting together. I've been trying to brainstorm libraries in the back of my head. What's going to be the first, you know, grain, you know, front end library? Because I know
Right.
everyone's going to be asking for it. People
Right.
dig up that old purple website and say, Oscar, what happened to the grain DOM support? And I just gotta turn my head away.
Right. So yeah, we know Figma, right? Figma, I think, is the big player.
Yeah.
Of the, I think it's running C++.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and I think the idea of have like a native app being a binary and being executable, and then have it in the web, I think is like mind blowing. So yeah, there are plenty of use cases where like JavaScript like doesn't really arrive to the point. So yeah, that's like pretty edge, but pretty exciting. So perfect. How's the feeling of having an idea when you were in an university and seeing it like people like jumping in? Like how does that feel? You see that your website, like the formatter, the documentation, like everything seems very polished, and you guys are like a few people involved and a small community. But since I joined the Discord, like there's non-stop people joining and asking questions. So, like my question is like, how's the feeling of this progress, like this growing at the beginning?
It feels absolutely incredible because, you know, from like a programming language author standpoint, you know, what more could you ask for, right? Typically, you know, you make languages like this and they're just toy languages, right? Like it's something that you play around with.
Yep.
Sort of everyone's going to come at you with the thought of, why are you doing this? Why aren't you working on this language that already exists? Why aren't you doing these other things? Oh, you're never going to succeed, you know, as like a language author, you know, whatnot. So it feels absolutely incredible to be where we are today. And so I'm incredibly proud of us. And it wouldn't be possible, you know, without every single person on our team. Because yeah, we have 5 people on our core team right now. So Philip and I are sort of like the compiler people doing like the deep, you know, compiler development, right? We have Blaine. Blaine is like if you want a language to succeed, you need a Blaine.
Okay.
Because effectively what Blaine is fantastic at is understanding truly what developers want and what they need to actually get their job done. And he can sort of go through and just make this a beautiful experience for everyone. So sort of the work that Blaine has been doing and Marcus on like a lot of the tooling, that's sort of how we started to get a little bit popular. Because when we start having tools like an LSP, having our VS Code extension, you know, things that developers
like
expect out of
the
language.
boundaries, no, the kind of like the accessibility roundings, right?
Yeah, exactly. You know, this is exactly, you know, how you start to get something together like this. In terms of like, why do we have like a half decent website? Like I said, before before I became a compiler engineer, I was, you know, a web developer. You know, I'm not a web designer by any means, but you know, I can understand when things like look bad or whatever. So sort of one of the things we want to do is make sure, hey, yeah, documentation is going to be important. Let's try and like get this documentation written, try and keep things up to date. But it's a huge struggle. It's so hard. Documentation is so incredibly hard. And you know, we have amazing contributors. I think I saw Jake in the chat. Jake has been doing an amazing job updating a lot of our documentation, and that's been really incredible.
Right. So how you set the bar of quality? Like, how you define like, oh, it's not my full-time job now. It's maybe none of our contributors are full-time on this, but we want to have like the quality as high as possible, and we are early. How you manage like all the forces here?
Yeah, the huge thing is that we sort of have the mindset that, yeah, we are trying to build a production language. We want to build a language that folks feel awesome using. Like we want we want writing Grain to feel as good as it feels to write Ruby code, or dare I say, as good as it feels to write Perl code. Like when
Right.
you write that code, you feel incredible. You feel like one of the greatest developers of all time.
Right.
We're not going to talk about how you feel when you come back and look at that code later, right? But like you feel really darn good when you write it.
Right.
And that's the beauty of ML style languages, right? Is that we can actually provide that experience where you feel amazing writing the code. You've got the type checker, just being there for you, having your back the entire way. And then when you come back to the code later, you can actually understand what's going on, right? But
Right.
yeah, I mean, overall, the idea is, even though this is, a side project for all of us right now, like we would love to continue building it, make it completely production grade. It would be fantastic if we had a couple of us, maybe all of us working full time on the language, like one day. That'd be amazing. And sort of as we're starting to get a little bit more, support, that sort of stuff is sort of kind of becoming a little bit possible, right? And that wouldn't happen if we weren't taking the language seriously, right?
Right.
And like people wouldn't take us seriously if we didn't show that we were taking the language seriously.
Exactly.
So I think that's a lot of what it is. Invest in
Right.
Grain, yes, I agree.
So, right. Yeah. If someone has some millions here and there, please like buy a team, and make that happen. That would be perfect. So what are the biggest challenges? Like what's really troubling? Like what's really like a big problem that is in the horizon for Grain?
Yeah, I'd say our largest challenges right now are really just around just having the time, honestly. It's just having the time and having the folks around, because we have all the things we want to do. We have like this huge roadmap of features we want to get done, things that we want to land. It's just a matter of getting the time. And sort of as an extension of that, just like funding, if I could pay Blaine to work on Grain for 6 months, I guarantee you, like we would be light years ahead of where we are today, right?
Right.
So I think that's largely what it is. It's largely just a matter of time. I think we've definitely got the passion, we've got the ideas. Yeah, I mean, luckily I sort of keep a counter in the back of my head of when the last time someone asked me, "Oh, when's Grain getting macros?" Right? And like, and it's like, yeah, I would love to work on macros, but obviously it's going to take quite a bit of time before we're ready to actually implement them and whatnot. And yeah, just finding folks who aren't too scared of compilers. I try and tell folks all the time, like, hey, it's really not too bad. It's not too hard. I'm friendly. I love to work with people who are interested in learning compilers and whatnot. But even with all of that, folks still say, yeah, I don't know. Like, writing a compiler sounds really scary. And yeah, our compiler is written in Reason. So if you're here, you probably have a vested interest in ML languages, and you probably have used Reason. So you're already going to feel pretty darn comfortable, I'd say.
Right. So let's go back to WebAssembly. And I think I said before that there's a subject that I have no clue about. So I dropped the ball. What's the problem? And can you like explain me, like I'm not 5, but the first year doing JavaScript? Explain me like the year 1 of a front end. What's the problem with WebAssembly and the garbage collector?
Oh, I feel like someone gave you this question just to get me heated. Yeah.
Right.
So
You cannot use like bad words or any sort of like blaming anyone.
Yeah, no, I'm
that's
not
kind of like the disclosure.
No, I'm not gonna trash anyone. Yeah, no. So the whole thing with garbage collection and WebAssembly is that there isn't a straightforward way to do it without WebAssembly giving you that feature. So sort of at a high level in terms of WebAssembly, the assembly language itself is kind of interesting. It's a typed assembly language. So for all the type nerds here in the chat, you'll
Right.
probably be excited to hear that. But yeah, basically, you can imagine WebAssembly as being written as though it were being executed on a stack machine. So essentially, you're pushing values onto a stack of particular types. We have like 6 types in WebAssembly right now. There's like 4 value types and like 2 different reference types, right? And so you push these values on the stack, and then you use like different functions are calling different operations that will pop values off the stack. So calling functions are, adding numbers or something like that, right? And it's all type checked. It's really, really cool. However, the downside of that is that you don't get some nice things that you get from writing like x86, for example, like being able to inspect the stack. And so typically how a lot of garbage collectors work is they just look in memory. They just look in memory and they say, hey, look at all these objects. Are any of these objects reachable by things that are in use, things that are on the stack? Like if you're actively calling a function or something like that, and it can go and clean it up. It can say, hey, you're not using this anymore. I'll throw it away. Which is awesome, right? That's not something we can do in WebAssembly because we don't have access to just freely look at all the values on the stack.
Right.
Which means you have 2 options. You can either implement a shadow stack, which is essentially you maintain your own stack. You can use some memory space and just maintain it the same way you would in any other language. But that's obviously going to give you a little bit of a performance hit, which isn't great. So that's option A. Option B is reference counting, which is what Grain does. So basically on every single time you call a function or whatnot, we're just tracking every single reference you have to an object. And when its reference count hits 0, we say, oh, you're not using that anymore. We clean it up.
Right. So you actively need to like trash your garbage, like make sure that these reference is not used anymore, delete it from the stack.
Right. And so the compiler does all that for you. Like you never have to, look at it or anything. But, for me as a compiler engineer, it's like something that I have to worry about. Right. Now, granted, there is a proposal for garbage collection in WebAssembly because conveniently a lot of runtimes that implement WebAssembly already have fantastic GCs. So like Chrome's V8 JavaScript engine, for example, already has a fantastic GC. So we have a proposal to just add GC, which will make me and the rest of the team so happy to just be able to swap over to it. And it's just a matter of time, for these proposals to get through and get implemented. It's not a small deal to just tell a group of engineers, hey, just give me a GC now, right? And of course, different languages have different interests for like what they're looking for out of a GC. Probably what we want out of a GC is very different than what Rust wants out of a GC, for example, right? And then, people, of course, want to have ways to say, oh, well, how do I disable garbage collection, things like that. And so it's sort of like one of the things that we're still working through in the WebAssembly community. But I think GC is actually going to be coming fairly soon. We're going to have it. It's going to be awesome.
All right.
The Grain team won't have to maintain GC anymore.
Right. So let's go back to the silly questions. How the proposals work? You mentioned like there's like a lot of proposals that are unblocking you or bringing the WebAssembly technology forward, and how the proposal works.
Yeah, so essentially, it starts with anyone in the WebAssembly community, maybe me, maybe you, says, oh, I have this idea for something that I'd like to see introduced into WebAssembly. And then there are community group meetings. You can go to these community groups. You can, pitch your idea to the whole community and say, hey, this is something that I want. And then, of course, there's a voting process where you can vote on something. If you're familiar with like TC39, the organization that does changes to JavaScript, it's sort of similar to that, where you get your proposals together, folks vote on them, and they go through phases. And so as the phases go along, you're getting more and more excited because that your feature is going to happen. So like, for example, one of the the latest ones is the exceptions proposal. I think I'm actually not sure. I haven't checked on it. I don't know if it has officially moved into implementation phase yet, but exceptions in WebAssembly are happening, which is incredibly exciting because up until now, a lot of languages just don't support exceptions, which it's amazing that we've gotten as far as we have. Conveniently, like in an ML style language, like Grain has a result type, right?
Right, that's fine. But what about Go?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's like, how do
you fatal a thing? What? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So there's not really sort of any catching, and I guess Go probably gets around it by the fact that their exceptions are more kind of just values, and you're constantly checking like, hey, is this thing not nil? Right.
Yeah.
And so that's probably how Go really gets around it. But for a language like C++, for example, it's a lot harder. I'm actually not sure how C++ exceptions are implemented in WebAssembly today.
Right.
But we're definitely excited for it. We've had to try and catch keywords reserved in Grain for a very long time now, and I'm excited to actually use them.
Right. And so how big is the community? Like, how many companies are betting on it? How many people has, like, I don't know, implementing the WebAssembly in the browser, on the browsers? How's that number
Yeah.
going?
So the WebAssembly community is definitely growing. It still feels kind of small. I was just at KubeCon a couple weeks ago, and there was a WASM day at KubeCon. And it
Right.
was funny because someone made a joke saying, yeah, 20% of the entire WASM community is here today. And it sort of made me laugh, but I knew it was kind of true because I did recognize a ton of the faces. I knew a lot of the people and whatnot. So the community still is small at the end of the day. And I think there's someone who said this is like, why are we so excited by a compilation target? Which is like, yeah, it's at the end of the day, it's just a compilation target, right? Like we want to disappear, right? Like we want people to be focused on being able to get their jobs done. So especially when I look at Grain, it's like, yes, we are a language for WebAssembly, but at the end of the day, we're a language. We're a language. We're trying to help you get your job done as efficiently as possible, right? But yeah, I mean, in terms of companies, I'd say one of the biggest players, like you mentioned earlier, Figma. If you've never used Figma, go use Figma and then realize, hey, this is running in a browser, and I don't believe that this is performant at all, but somehow it's actually really fast. That's your feeling using Figma, right? Shopify is one of the biggest players.
Right.
Where though actually what they're doing now is kind of interesting. They're actually embedding a JavaScript runtime inside of WebAssembly. So WebAssembly Sandbox running JavaScript, which sounds kind of silly, right?
Why?
But the neat thing behind this is that you get all of WebAssembly sandboxing capabilities. So you can run untrusted user code, inside of inside these sandboxes. So you can run arbitrary JavaScript. And in fact, the company that I work at in my day job, that's the whole premise of our company is, hey, we will allow you to let your customers run untrusted user code inside of your application, and it's going to be perfectly okay.
Right.
Which, sounds kind of scary, but like WebAssembly allows us to do that. And we can have very fine-grained, pun intended, control over everything that module is allowed to do, which is really, really neat. Yeah.
So going back to the language, sorry, not the language, PTL, I think Gabriel's asked me to do because it's the fancy one of saying programming language theory. So yeah, so let's go into the language. What the inspiration comes from? Like I see that there's like some visually, like just syntactically stuff from OCaml, but then models are completely different. So yeah, where's the inspiration? What's your like best language, and or which features from the best language did you pick to make Grain, or at least the UI or just the syntax of it?
Yeah, so just sort of around syntax. Our syntax is definitely inspired a lot by Reason, which sort of just looking at it like a big picture. OCaml is an amazing language. It's a fantastic, amazing language. And the big barrier for a ton of people was just the syntax. And so the Reason project saying, hey, let's throw out this syntax and give it something that people are familiar with was incredibly smart. And that's why we've seen so much success with Reason. Because a lot of folks don't believe me when I tell them, Reason's just OCaml, right? Like it's just OCaml. It's just a different syntax. They're like, oh, really? Like, yeah. And that's sort of what we want to do with Grain is we want to provide that familiar syntax. So a lot of our syntax definitely comes from sort of like Reason, JavaScripty sort of syntax that people, C style that we feel comfortable with, are like the way that we do types is very Java-esque. I had someone recently say TypeScript, and I was like, I'm not going to say that it came from TypeScript.
Right.
I'm going to say that our syntax for this came from Java. But you know, it's
I don't know
similar
if you want
to.
to win the crowd with Java neither, but
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't know. I don't know who we're winning there, but it's like, you know, people know the syntax. They don't look at it and say, I don't know what's going on.
right.
So that's sort of
So
the idea
how
there.
how you decide to do differently the model system?
Yeah. So I guess the big asterisk on the module system is that we have some pretty big plans to redesign how modules work in Grain. So I probably can't uh, go into too much detail on how it works now. Because one of the premises of the language itself is we want to take all these amazing functional programming language concepts and sort of present them in a way that people say, oh, this is awesome, and I want to use this. This is amazing.
Right.
And so when you look at something like module functors, for example, functors are amazing and they're awesome, but you scare people when you use the word functor. People get visibly uncomfortable
Yep.
when they hear that word, right?
Yeah.
And so the question is, you know, how can we do something like that in Grain, but you know, still have it feel accessible for people? They don't feel scared of it. They understand it. You know, are we like first class modules, like modules
Right.
as functions, right? So
Right.
yeah, I can't say too much about the module system because we want to completely blow it up and change it. But
Amazing.
we'll
So what
see
are the
more on that.
other like semantics that you feel like people are scared when you look at maybe OCaml or maybe another languages? You mentioned people ask for macros. Maybe like PPXs are like one of the favorite words here in the show. So what's your opinion of macros?
Yeah. So macros in general, I feel tend to scare people because they're it's just a tiny compiler.
Yep.
Right? Like you're writing a tiny little compiler yourself to produce some code, and that's going to be scary. Like, am I going to mess it up? Am I going to have this huge code explosion? Things like that, right? And so, in general, in Grain, we want to add macros to the language, but we want to do it in a way where it feels safe. Like it feels
Right.
like safe. You feel like, hey, I can do this. But we also want you to feel like, hey, should I be doing this? You know, when you're writing a macro.
Right.
And so a lot of our idea for, you know, macros, and of course is all subject to change, but a lot of it is around JavaScript tag template literals. So if you've ever seen them in JavaScript, it's like the thing where you have like a string and it has the backticks around it, and then you have this this identifier in the front that specifies, hey, this is the function that's going to process, you know, this string. That's sort of how it's going to look. But in terms of how you're actually going to write one, is yeah, we're going to allow you to write a grammar for your macro and say,
Right.
hey, this is what the syntax of my macro is going to be. So, for example, if you wanted something like JSX in Grain, we don't want you to have a preprocessor. You know, we don't want you to have a tool like Babel to do that. We want you to be able to just write a macro that says, hell yeah, here's JSX. It comes, you get it just
I'm
by
so hot
importing
now.
the library.
Oof. Yeah. I'm yeah. Oof. I think yeah. I mean, like, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's
I'm installing the binary. Like, yeah, I cannot speak. Joking. I
that's
already installed it before. So.
I mean that's the idea, right?
Right.
Is we want it to feel that easy. We want it to be that simple. It's going to be, you know, a lot of work for us to get there. Like, you know, of course, like even looking at like our build system that we're working on, which is going to be called Silo. A fantastic name. We've been dreaming of building this tool for a long time. But you know, being able to, you know, build this, have, you know, fast grain builds. Actually, going back to one of the things right now is we're trying to get native binaries to everyone, because right now what we're shipping is sort of a version of Grain that's compiled to JavaScript and held inside of a binary that's got Node embedded in it, which is like fine. But like we want people to feel like, oh, like this is like, you know, a fast compiler and whatnot. So then we'll tell people, oh, if you have the time, build the compiler from source, and they'll say, oh yeah, like, you know, this is And they're like, oh look, it's kind of fast. And we're like, yeah, like we're trying to work on stuff like that. And so that's why we're so excited about silos, because that's going to be the way that we ship this
Right.
to everyone and have it working on all systems. Honestly, we would have had silo built ages ago if we didn't have to support Windows, but we want to be available for everyone, right? So like we have to be able to support all of these things.
Right.
So
So another question that comes to mind very fast, looking at Grain, is like, what's your competition? Like, who is the person that or team that are going for like a platform or Grain, like to have other languages that are very popular, or maybe some other new languages as well that wants to target WebAssembly? Yeah, the competition.
yeah, I'd say right now, conveniently, we don't have to fight much of the language ecosystem because it's really the languages that just support WebAssembly. So, maybe in like 3 years, we'll have a lot more sort of global language competition. But right now, the languages that we're competing against are Rust and AssemblyScript. Like those are the two languages that we're competing against.
Right.
And so the nice thing is we're not trying to do the things that Rust and AssemblyScript are trying to do. I was going to mention Zig, but I was like, I'm not even going to mention Zig, actually. But so Rust is trying to be a mission critical language that says, hey, I am writing this application, like I'm building a rocket. It's going to go to space, and I need all of my systems to be absolutely perfect and work, right? That's the idea behind Rust, which is fantastic. But of course, once you're using Rust and like you're using they don't have a type checker, they have a borrow checker, right? And so the borrow checker is going to scream at you and tell you, hey, did you just pass this value to two different functions? Are you kidding me? What's wrong with you, right? And that's gonna get on your nerves after a little bit, right? And so Rust is this like very low level systems language, right? And then you have AssemblyScript, which is a bit higher level than Rust, but the idea behind AssemblyScript is to still be pretty close to WebAssembly, right? Like they don't have like closures or things like that. Like it's really just we're writing these functions. It's very like we're using WebAssembly types and whatnot. That's the idea behind AssemblyScript. So Grain is different because we're trying to be a high level language. Like we want to be a language that feels like writing Ruby or writing Python. We don't want you thinking about low level WebAssembly types. We don't want you thinking about any of that. Like we want you to just write some code the same way that you're just going to bust out like Reason or something and write that code. That's what we're aiming for with the language. So we sort of carved out this little section for ourselves, and it's just a matter of whether or not we can actually execute on it. Like if we can actually truly execute on saying, hey, we have this language that's super easy for you to use, super easy for you to start with, get onboarded, we've got a real chance. And of course, the clock is ticking because as time moves on, we're starting to see more languages come to WebAssembly. Like it would suck if, Python was like just hyper available for WebAssembly today, right? Then we might have a hard time. But even still, like Python, for example, people are hyped for Python and running in the browser or running in other places WebAssembly supports. But at the end of the day, Python's an interpreted language. It's going to have to run an interpreter. Your binaries are going to be huge. It's not going to be quite the right choice. So we've got some time. We've got some time.
Cool. Yeah, I was definitely thinking about that. People on the chat keep saying like languages like Zig or V or like any sort of like super niche. Same with like maybe at the beginning as Grain. But yeah, just curious. How the people from the community helps building WebAssembly? Can you influence the implementation aside from proposals? Can you try to change how the browsers interact with it? So what's really like your barrier as a community and the big players that are implementing Chrome, basically?
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. And it sort of shocked me that we have any influence at all, but it turns out that we do, which I think is pretty cool. So for example, I was lucky enough to have a one-on-one with Luke Wagner, who is one of the co-creators of WebAssembly. And it was cool. We had like a chat for maybe like an hour or so, and he just said, hey, from like a programming language author standpoint, tell me exactly where you feel WebAssembly needs to go. like tell me what your language needs. And I thought that was incredible that felt absolutely incredible to me as a language author, saying, hey, the folks actually building out the platform actually care about what we want, right? And then I was able to voice, hey, these are the things that I really want in the language. Like, hey, for us, if you could give us garbage collection, we would be so freaking happy if we could have GC right now, right? I was able to say, like, hey, and actually for all the nerds in the chat, there's a WebAssembly proposal called the stack switching proposal, which in other words, it's basically the WebAssembly continuations proposal. And so, of course, for me, I was like, hey, I really want this proposal, please. Like, I want this. I'd be so excited. Algebraic effects in grain, like, it would be truly incredible, right? And so, yeah, it's sort of incredible that we're able to do that. And even sort of outside of WebAssembly, even in the OCaml ecosystem, it's truly crazy to me how it's like, tools that we all know and love care about sort of like supporting our project and, making some changes for us and whatnot. So I think, that's been incredible to see what's happening. But yeah, I'd say overall, the WebAssembly community is very open and listening to the languages and what they're building and whatnot. Especially like if you go to any of the WebAssembly community group like meetings, like the people who are there are the people who are implementing languages and whatnot, and just saying like, yeah, these are the things that I want. Please, can I have them? And generally, for the most part, people say yes. There are some times when people might say, oh, I want like this thing that JavaScript has. And then the WebAssembly folks are like, we really don't want that in WebAssembly. Like JavaScript can keep that feature. And, stuff like that happens.
Right. I can imagine. One of the that's not a question, but there has been like some rumors that in the past Bob, which is the maintainer of ReScript, wanted to end up doing like some sort of like ReScript. Well, at that time was obviously OCaml or BacketScript. He wanted to end up at the end in WebAssembly land. So he wanted to arrive to a point where you could change the target and then don't do drama, Eduardo.
This is exactly what's going on in the back of my head.
That's exactly not what I wanted to do. It was more like how is that possible for Grain? Does a language like ReScript might make sense for this case? But what's your take on that? Would you see at some point like the nature of the project of some sort of like two completion targets of WebAssembly and then JavaScript, or that sounds like unrealistic, silly?
I don't think it's unrealistic. I think like if they really wanted to do it, they could. Because essentially that's what the BuggleScript project was in general. Was like they could have just said we're going to use JS. We're going to use JS of OCaml. They could have just said that, right? But they're like, no, we're going to build our own backend that properly can spit out some super crazy optimized JavaScript. And so, yeah, if they wanted to do WebAssembly, they could. I think the biggest disappointment that folks would have if they tried to do that today is WebAssembly's lack of support for a lot of browser APIs and whatnot. If they decided to do that right now, you would get a ton of JavaScript glue code, just like an absolute enormous amount of glue code just trying to hit different browser APIs. Like I'm thinking of like, someone trying to use like Reason React or something like that. Like it's not going to be fast. It's going to be barely WebAssembly at that point. And so probably right now it's not really worth it. But granted, like maybe in like 4 or 5 years when we have all the WebAssembly APIs for interacting with the DOM and interacting with, sort of other systems like things, they could probably do it. And it could be a good target and it could be really interesting, especially if you can bring the whole ecosystem with you. I think like it would be an admirable goal a few years from now. I don't think it would be smart for them to go for that right now.
Right. So there's a lot of like future stuff that when we talk about WebAssembly, feels that now is the moment to invest the time on building the infrastructure, the platform, you mean anything. But when it's going to be the moment? When are going to be very sure to have like a big option of, can I use React 25 or React 21 or WebAssembly? When is going to be like this time of the big option?
That's a fantastic question. I think that like in terms of like that specific question, like using React, that's going to be when we get our WebAssembly DOM API. like honestly,
Right.
because even right now, for example, like we can bring DOM stuff back to Grain, but we're gonna have sort of like a mini runtime in JavaScript that's handling references and saying like, oh, I have these DOM nodes, and I can pass that DOM node as a reference with a reference type to WebAssembly, and then we can do stuff. So actually, I've actually thought about this quite a bit. One of the cool things you can do is like if you implemented your virtual DOM in WebAssembly,
Right.
like especially like with reference types or whatnot, you can compute the diffs on your virtual DOM insanely fast in WebAssembly, and then when you actually do that reconciliation or whatnot, like that step where you actually have to talk to the browser, it could actually be worth it. I haven't had time to look and see, like,
I mean,
hey, is
just to
this
close the loop, just to close the loop, like you said at the beginning, I don't know which library we should build, blah, 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 blah. I think you answered the question. I think like a virtual implementation doesn't seem like, like, I don't know, like 2 months project. It should be like something relatively small, taking out the edge cases for sure, but re-implementing a virtual div, that doesn't seem crazy and would be very easy to benchmark with. I think we have like a few implementations of the virtual DOM, I think. So I would encourage anyone or you probably implement it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the major thing is when I think of these things, I'm always thinking of like the super big picture of, I'm like, I want macros when I do that. It's like
Right.
I would be really happy if I had macros to try and do that. I think that's like the huge thing. Which granted, like, if I throw out, some of those dreams, I could probably try and write some of the stuff now. I know like we added some support to our project that we use to actually emit the WebAssembly code for reference types and whatnot, and we just have to do some work to get that into the compiler. But yeah, it could be kind of interesting to see what we can make happen.
Right. So how you convince people to contribute to the project? Like I remember Blaine. I think I even saw the pull request where like migrate all the code or maybe like 80% of the code base into Reason. How would you convince people to invest in your language, aside from like, of course, listening to all the show and listening to the goods and bad and stuff? What are the good parts to contribute? So
yeah, I'd say in general, that's my major hustle. I feel like half my time that's not spent actually writing code is trying to get folks to contribute.
Right.
Which, I mean, a lot of what we do, a lot of the stuff that I say is, hey, yes, it is a language, and so a big part of it is the compiler, but we have so much more like in all of our projects to contribute to. Especially like one of the great places is the standard library. The standard library is fantastic because you get to write grain code. And I think that's like the biggest win, which it feels good too, especially I know for myself, whenever I get to write some grain code, I'm like, nice. I'm like, this language is working out, right? Like this is good, right? And so like especially around standard library, around tooling, around documentation, these are all fantastic ways for folks to get involved. Although I I really recommend, if you're at all interested in compilers, like hop into our Discord and start a conversation. Say, hey, I'm interested in compilers. Maybe I don't know anything about compilers. Maybe I've tinkered around or whatever, but I'm willing to learn and I'm excited. And I think we're friendly. I think we're happy to help people out with, just getting on board and maybe implementing a small feature. Like there's tons of like low-hanging fruit in terms of like the language that like I would love to implement, but I don't have time or whatever. And if I can help someone else be incredibly successful, banging out this language feature, then that's a huge win for me, because that means that you might be able to do another language feature that,
I wanted to ask, do you have like some sort of like discussion proposals, kind of like a small system, or the roadmap is already like defined by all of you?
I'd say the roadmap is largely defined on how people are using Grain and how people want to use Grain. So when people, believe it or not, people might not realize this, but if you come in the Discord and you say, hey, I'm trying to do this thing, we might answer like in the public channel, oh yeah, we're thinking about that, or we're trying to do that, or whatever. But in our back channels, like we're scrambling. We're like, how can we enable this person to do what they want to do? Like we want people to use a language and feel successful in whatever they're trying to do, right? So if you if you come into our Discord and say something, you can easily nerd snipe us into potentially
Right.
trying to get your feature out like way faster than you would have imagined.
Right. Right. That's like, yeah. I'm truly get amazed when I got introduced to Grain, and I think meeting you and knowing like all the backs, like all the backsides of the language and the community that it's building around WebAssembly and of course Grain. I think I'm overexcited for it, and I hope like everybody in the chat is as well. So yeah, just visit all of it, the website, and all install everything and compile, yeah, like at least the hello world, I would say, or at least like your favorite game or your favorite pet project tonight for sure. Like tomorrow morning, we want to see the spike on analytics. But yeah, just I'm definitely gonna do that, and yeah. So is any question for you, Gabriel? I think I got you muted all the time.
No, it was like it's a subject. I'm totally like not my not my thing. If there was like if there was something like crypto related, you could ask something, but no,
I
like
mean, we can chat crypto. So sort of one of the things that we're doing right now. We're currently developing a SDK for the Near Protocols blockchain.
oh, that's a wow alpha leak right here, alpha leak. Yeah, that's a cool one.
Yeah,
I
I mean
was
it's neat because right now, like for folks trying to write smart
that's pretty
contracts
cool. Uh-huh.
in languages that like basically right now it's kind of like Rust. You can write smart contracts in Rust, maybe
Mm-hmm.
like assembly script or whatnot. And we're like, wow, imagine if you could launch your own token or mint your own NFTs and it's all ingrained and it's like not scary, it's not Solidity, right? Like it's this is stuff that's exciting, right? Like because WebAssembly has uses in all these places, right?
Oh, that's
So
fucking amazing. Well, that's actually a huge coincidence because I'm investing in here, so that's kind of handy for me.
yeah,
oh,
for
that's
sure.
oh, that's pretty cool, man. I'm really glad that the crypto space is sponsoring tech like that.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware. Like that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone wants like alpha access to like the SDK to try to write some contracts or anything, like hit us up in the Discord. Honestly, like
Oh, that's a good
we'll make
one.
it happen.
Nice. Oh, I'm gonna try to spread the word for some crypto friends like that want to work on engineering. So how does that work? Like it's there is something already working or just like prototyping still?
Yeah, so we have like a prototype of the SDK. We're hoping to release it by like the end of the year.
Oh,
That's like the
that's
hope is that we'll
cool.
have the
Uh
SDK out. Granted, like it compiles contracts, so it's a definitely still a use at your own risk. Don't throw all of your eggs into one contract
huh.
sort of vibe right now. But yeah, like
Oh,
anyone who wants to give it a shot, like just hit us up in the Discord and we can try and get you some
oh
access to it and
that's
getting
that's
some stuff
fantastic.
written.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I'm gonna even myself. I'm gonna try and tell some friends about it. That was like really. I wasn't expecting. I was just joking.
Yeah, no, but
Nice,
yeah, it's seriously
nice.
great opportunities, and that's the beauty of WebAssembly, right? That we're seeing
Mhm.
like WebAssembly not just in the browser and like on the server, on blockchains, on microcontrollers, like on like we're gonna see WebAssembly code in light bulbs, and I think Grain has made
Oh,
it
that's.
like the day that there's Grain code running on the light bulbs in your house. That's gonna be the day that we
oh,
know we've made it.
that's pretty amazing. There is any questions from the chat? Like this is the time. I think this crypto stuff really opened it for a lot of more questions. I'm
Well
not sure
typed light
if.
bulbs.
That you mean this. Yeah, it doesn't look like we have
Yeah, people
any
want to
more.
discuss about like yeah, just typing, inference, like they want to discuss like high level, Gabriel. Like we don't have a chat that doesn't write 2 or 3 compilers per week.
They nerds.
Right, yeah.
Just go.
Good question. Good question. The roadmap. We mentioned the roadmap, but we didn't mention what's gonna happen on point five. So I think it would be very cool to know what's next really soon.
Yeah, so the stuff that's coming really soon, sort of, as always, a ton of bug fixes and whatnot. And I'm gonna forget a bunch of stuff, and my team's gonna be mad at me. I think I'm currently working on a new parser for Grain that's way faster than our current parser, which is gonna be pretty exciting for sure. Um, Oh yeah, we just launched type aliases. That was a huge one. So shout out to Eduardo for helping us fix compiler bug to get those done. It's hilarious too because that PR was just sitting open for like almost a year, and luckily Blaine was
Yeah,
able to nerd
how is
snipe
Eduardo?
Eduardo.
How's Eduardo everywhere?
Yeah, seriously.
Eduardo, get some like 2 years vacation or something.
Seriously. Yeah, a bunch of docs updates which are awesome, some new stuff in the standard library. I know like array lists, some stuff there, so some pretty neat stuff coming out pretty soon. So hopefully we can get those releases out really quick. I'd be super excited for that. Sort of outside of that, actually, stuff that's also happening sort of adjacent to the language soon, is support for binding Grain to a lot more places, making it way easier to use Grain in the browser and interop with JavaScript and interop with other languages in WebAssembly. So that'll be coming soon as well, which I think people are going to be pretty excited for.
Right. That's really cool. That's super cool. Yeah. I really enjoy like talking with you for sure. We have been like running a little bit like longer than expected, but I think that was very worth it.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you having me on the show. It's definitely awesome to be here in good company for sure.
Amazing.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was
I think we want to share about
amazing.
like our sponsors as well. I think we have Monteiro, we have Eduardo, we have Brain, we have I don't know, Marco.
Marcos,
So
yeah.
we
Thank
are
you.
very proud to have like
Yes.
sponsors. When some blockchain company like give us like all the money, like just all the money, then we're gonna have a conference and we're gonna have like a proper
Yeah.
1 hour presentations about any of the excites or things that we are excited about. So
Yeah.
hopefully,
Let's see. Yeah, that was pretty fun. I like it. Thanks everyone for coming. There are no more questions here in the chat. I had a lot of fun. Oscar is a great guest, and come again like when we have some announcement, when you get like 1 million to 20 million grant from Near Protocol. That should be a good news to give here in the show. And that's it. Like, thanks everyone for coming. The video will be soon available on YouTube, and that's it. Like, see you in the next one.
sweet. See you guys.
See you everyone. So, okay.